Welcome back to the Mr. Gloat podcast, and today we are coming to you guys for only the final video of this week. As I'm recording this, I'm already now planning on recording 5 straight episodes in the coming week as we speak. Because today, guys, on the 13th of Monday to the 17th of Friday, one episode at each, we are going to review each title from the female boxing division, also known as the Autumn Weight. So with that being said, we better almost talk about it. So that's what I'm going to get through in the weekends as we speak. But before we get through all of that, we do have a few topics to talk about. Well, make that 2. The third topic is going to be today. Today, I am going to review my top 5 undefeated boxers in the Cruiserweight. Now, the rules are simple. 1, you have to be undefeated. To be retired for good, you cannot come back again. 2, you have to be competing in the Cruiserweight. If you've competed in any other weight class, that's okay. Depending on who you're asking, it's okay depending on what other weight class. As long as you have had fights in the Cruiserweight, and a successful one, depending on how many fights you fought, you're still in. And that means if you only had 10 professional fights in your career, you will be counted on this list. Those are the 3 keys. You have to be in Cruiserweight, you have to have 10 pro fights, and you have to retire with an undefeated record. Don't be in the same situation like Ike Ibeabuchi. It's not worth it. Not worth it. But anyway, let's get down to business. Before we get to it, guys, we better talk about the first topic. The FIFA World Cup 2026 is dead. The FIFA World Cup 2026 is dead. Because since the quarterfinals actually ended on July the 6th or July the 7th, because at this moment, July the 6th is dead. Like, yes, I get it. The quarterfinals are still happening. Here's the thing. With Morocco in the quarterfinals right now, and Egypt are still competing against Argentina, which is already down the toilet. So Morocco defeated Canada 3-0. France defeated Paraguay 1-0. Yes, I know Norway defeated Brazil, and even though Spain defeated Portugal, which was a great match, that still doesn't cut the mustard. When England defeated Mexico, and then Belgium completely obliterated United States, and to this day, I will never understand why North America will never try. For reasons why North America has not tried once makes no sense. Losing 4-1 in utter dominance, that's no excuse. If someone said that they were going to have a gun and take out the fans of any other country out there that came to their backyard and defeated our team, I would say, do it. Because what's the point of living in North America? Whether you're in Mexico, Canada, and the United States, what's the point if you can't even try? It makes no sense. And speaking about what makes no sense, the country of Norway in the World Cup have only performed 4 times in their career. Like, keep this in mind, Norway has not had a great career in the World Cup, considering they've only performed 4 times in their career. Like, in 1938 was their inaugural year. They only performed 1 game and lost because that was actually a bracket tournament they were competing in, and they lost in a close battle against Italy in extra time. And then in 1994, they finally came in the competition. They got eliminated in group stage, finishing 17th, got 1-1-1 victory. And then 1998, they managed to win a game. Even they had another a draw and a loss in their career, but they still managed to make it to the round of 16, and they lost their next game and got eliminated. Still. And then before you know it, it took them 7 more World Cup appearances to finally make it. And they had to make it here. And with 4 wins in their career and 1 draw, that's no excuse. No, that's no excuse to be into that situation. There's no reason why Norway is doing better than anyone else, and that just doesn't make sense. And not only that, the bracket format's this, because Norway is taking on England, and we're hearing reports that England are becoming the most hot, dangerous commodity in the division, considering they only have 1 draw and 2 wins. And considering Argentina has 3 wins in their career, France has 3 wins in this game going on this year in the group, and even Mexico had 3 wins, and they could not defeat England. No, come on, don't do that. I don't know why God is the most disrespectable person in the history when it comes to this, and that just upsets me. It makes no sense. So, of course, I think Colombia is going to win. Argentina is going to win. Those 2 games are happening today, and it doesn't make sense. So by July the 9th, we're going to have France versus Morocco in the quarterfinals. Morocco is the only South African team left alive, and at this moment, what's the point? They're over with. Like, you have Spain taking on Belgium. Belgium, Spain are both European countries. Norway and England, European countries. And Argentina and Colombia, depending, they might make it. On the 11th in Kansas City, they're both South African. It's no competition. There is nothing interesting to watch World Cup. What's the point of watching the World Cup if any of our continents can't even try? So it just makes you wonder, why is God doing this to us? Like, if we're going to wait 4 more years until the FIFA World Cup for their 100th anniversary, which will take place, let me look up what country they're going to do it. And I was assuming that they were going to do it some other way in another. I assumed this year they were going to do it somewhere else, but so we have reports that the FIFA World Cup will take place in places of Morocco, Portugal, Spain, or maybe from the central areas of Argentina. So, yes, South America might be the host of countries. And that right there is, that's just disrespectable. It just doesn't make sense why we have to be in that situation, because this just doesn't make sense why we have to go way down there. Like look, we have Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, and in the areas of proposed venues that might happen, as in talks for 2030. The thing is, it just seems like if we can't do nothing in the United States, it just makes us wonder how bad it is. And if any of the countries from South America that we are performing into these areas next to the Spain and Portugal borders, it just still doesn't make no sense. It just doesn't. There's just no point of it. If South America can do nothing next 4 years from now, and us Americans as well, it's too late. And by the way, like I said before, 4 years ago, they had a 16 bracket tournament. Now this year, they have a 32 tournament. They upped more countries to compete in the World Cup. And now, because of this, we can't even make it past the round of 16? No, come on, don't do that. I just don't like God for that. I don't know why God is not making nothing historical here. Like, yes, Brazil and Argentina are undefeated, and they're competing in tough competition, and of course, people are now saying that both of those countries with undefeated records might make it. Here's the thing. With undefeated 3-0 record, it's pretty rare to be in the World Cup. It's hard to do it. So people are now expecting maybe France and Argentina might lose some of their confidence because of their winning record. And but what's the point of talking about that? Because they're both countries that have won World Cups already, and it doesn't make sense. Yes, I know Germany and France failed to make it to the round of 32, but again, I want more of those other great countries to be out in the competition and eliminated. I don't know why we have to witness this. It's the worst thing we've ever seen, and I just don't know why. I don't know why. It's like putting a gun to someone's mouth, blowing their heads, telling them to not dominate the USA, or else we're going to blow the mayor's head off. That's what this is, and this is disrespectful for everyone to be involved in. And I'm expecting riots and other dangerous things to happen because people don't know how dangerous the United States is, the land of the free, the land. And I think people are now dangerously in a close of upset historicalness. Here's a problem. If we're in the country of France, here's the thing. France and Italy and other countries have had riots in their area. And back in the day in 1950, Brazil, I think it was 1950, Brazil was taking on another country in the final game. And the game is, if they actually scored, they won or drawed, they would still become World Cup champions. They lost 3-2, and they brought in the mayors and other people there, and they were congratulating them, thinking that they were going to win the tournament. They didn't. And the whole people in the crowd were obliterated. Some people say that some people committed suicide by jumping off after the final whistle blew, everything else. It was legit. It just goes to show you that there's some countries out there that would care. So it's the most dangerous World Cup we've ever seen. And I just expecting so much violence to go on in the years to come until today, after this whole 16 final bracket's over. We don't know how dangerous and scary it's going to be when we get to the round of 8 and the semifinals, because there's no Africans, no Americans left. There's no Asians. Japan completely lost, and I don't understand why Japan didn't even try to keep their lead. I don't know why Japan didn't try. They had it, and then they messed up in the last minutes of the game. It's the worst. I don't know why. Anyway, back with more reports here. So today, as we do, I only have a couple paragraph informations here to talk about. Today we do have now talks going on into the boxing world. We now have some surprising footage going on here. Interesting picks for boxing going on today. Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury are into the Wembley Stadium as they can host on their condition with Turki Al-Sheikh. So considering Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury are having their fights days apart from each other in the 4th week of July, the thing is, you got to understand, if both of them can get their victories in, depending on how they win it, we might get the fight. So it's not like anything is going to go on, but there has been talks. We might have an opportunity here. But don't expect that the fight will be called off, because it might. So keep that in mind. Alexander Usyk is in advance for negotiations for his farewell fight with Deontay Wilder with his Ring Magazine belt. Welterweight title, Ring Magazine champion is on the line with it as they stun the boxing world, going on with everything going on in the world today. But considering with all this being said, there are hinting the fight of new winners with wins with Fabio Wardley and Daniel Dubois. Because even though Usyk did hinted that he might fight the winner of Dubois and Wardley to become undisputed, unfortunately, with that being said, he did promise to have a Tyson trilogy, as he said a few months ago as well. And after he defeated Verhoeven in Egypt, with Mark Lysing stopping the fight in the last second during the remaining second of the 11th round, Now it's clear that none of those fights will be happening. What's the point of having a trilogy fight with Dubois because Dubois defeated Wardley? Fury is now in the fight. You gotta understand, it's not that possible to throw in your eggs and start calling this a horrible idea. Because if you start throwing eggs at someone's window, you better remember who you're looking at. And I think Usyk better be careful to not make up his mind here because he just made up his mind. He's going to take on with Wilder. He's going to find a way. But with all that being said, we are now having talks that he is going to fight the Bronze Bomber depending. Because Wilder is coming off his scrappy split decision victory against Derek Chisora on April the 4th. And even though the 40-year-old American from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, former WBC champion and over 10 title defenses, is still a big enough draw to provide Usyk with any sort of major. And I do believe that. I think when Usyk was trying to talk in talks with Wilder in December, I think there were some promoters and people out there that didn't want to take that risk. Which has to be the reason why Usyk is signing out with he's signing with Zuffa Boxing. And here's the thing, if Dana White does put a heavyweight title, his own title, Zuffa, on the line, oh boy, can you imagine historical moments there? That could be amazement. Don't get me wrong, Wilder can still pull out an unbelievable punch. Yes, his power might have not been there with his Tyrell Herndon fight last year ago. And even though he did have talks in post-fight that he didn't want to overhurt Derek Chisora, but when you look at the fight and see how much punching power he put in, it makes you wonder something's up. But anyway, we're just going to have to wait and see. But all we can say is the fight might happen in late December, or it might happen January or February, or we might have to wait another full year until May. But we might expect that Alexander Usyk might do it before he turns 40 years old, which is in the month of January. So we'll just see. So now with all that being said, the final topic we're going to talk about today before we get to our top 5 undefeated cruiserweight fighters. Murat Gassiev is set to defend his world title against Peter Kadiru. So Peter Kadiru, let's look him up. So this is who Peter Kadiru is. Peter Kadiru, in boxing, was originally... Now, Peter Kadiru was originally involved in the rankings at one point. Peter Kadiru was once ranked in the WBA. It said that he was outranked in the top, barely in the top 15 in the month of May, or maybe April. So he was involved in the rankings. He wasn't last month ago, and he's not this month. He was past June. I don't know if he was ranked May. He might have been ranked in April. He might be close to the top 20, just barely. So the reason why we are... Like, it would have been better if we had Nelson Heisa, who's ranked number 6 in the WBA, be involved in this. Like Vartan, who's actually taken on Joe Joyce. He's ranked number 5. And even though Tony Yoka was ranked number 14 in the rankings, but because of his back injury, he just cost himself another good opportunity to make things up for his career. And this might be the end for Tony Yoka here, because that's just legit bad. With Phil Pergovich and taking on Moses Atama, and Atama's ranked number 1, but he's taking on Hergovich as we speak, who's number 7 in the WBA. And Artem Saslenkov is also in the boxing event as we speak, and he's ranked number 10. So I can't really say for certain about any of this because it just seems like there's I just don't know what to say. So Peter Kadiru is a 23-1 fighter, 13 knockouts. He has been drafted in to save the show. So this is almost like a cherry pick fight because Kadiru is not ranked in the WBA or in any other weight organization classes. So at this moment, it makes no sense because Kadiru is not even rated in the WBA. So what's the point of having any of this here? What's the sense of having ratings? Because I think many of the organizations should have an investigation telling us this doesn't make sense. Wait a minute, this makes no sense. Wait, we can't bump up a fighter in the rankings, not even being close. I think that's a problem because today, in the world that we're living in today, with no police organization to cover this up, no attorney, no one to be involved with this, which is why that boxing is becoming less irrelevant because of this stuff. So it just makes you wonder for this. I get it, even though Tony Yoka was supposed to fight, and this is what you get. It just is bad. But they did got the reports that the IBA organizations got straight to work as they had the credible replacement. So even though they did have Joe Joyce, who was scheduled to face Artem Saslenkov in a 10-round fight and was running for a shot at Gassiev, again, he's not even ranked neither. So it does stink that because this fight is taking place in Russia and we know what's going on in the world today. So I just can't really say much about this because I just wish we can cover some of these things up and try to understand what's going on. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to have to learn more about what's going on behind the scenes and understand something is up. Unfortunately, considering I'm the one following all this information up from top to bottom, there's just a lot of confusion here in the world today. And to be honest, I just feel like something is up. I don't know what's going on here right now as we speak, but we're going to have to find out sooner than later. And technically, it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while to understand what's going on here, understand what we're trying to do. But again, I really can't understand why. Because Peter Kadiru, the problem is Peter Kadiru has not have a lot of time on his hands. And I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how to tell anyone about this because it just seems like something is up. Something is happening behind the scenes. But to be honest, we'll never understand what's going on right now as we speak because we are going to have to try to cover some details up and try to find out what's going on because something is happening here in the world of boxing, and I'm trying to get down to business and understand what we're seeing here is this is not what boxing should be. Because any of the 15 guys that I just mentioned on BoxRec, concluding fighters like Jarrell Miller, who's ranked number 2, And of course, Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, number 3 and 4, but they're busy. Gergen Hovhannian, the Armenian fighter, 10-0. He's ranked number 8. Daniel Perot is taking over to revenge his brother's defeat, so he can win another fight. So he's at number 9. He's busy. F.A. Ajagba is number 11. Kem Lundqvist is number 12 from Denmark. Another German fighter named Temur Mamoyan is ranked number 13, and he has 11-0 record. Peter Kadiru is also a German fighter, and he has 1 defeat, and he's not even ranked. Rico Verhoeven's number 11, and again, and the rest of the fighters from Heisen, the 2 Russian fighters, Tony Yoka, again, there's so much stuff going on here, but none of these fighters are busy to fight anyone. I don't know why that has to be the case. It really makes no sense, and man, it's so abysmal for me to talk about this crap because I'm just a little bit upset that we're not getting something here. We're not getting nothing done here, and I feel like there's so much problems going on here, and I just don't know. I don't understand what's happening right now because there should be something that's good about all this, but this is not. This is the worst I've ever seen in my life, and I rest my case. Yeah. Anyway, enough talking about all this and this or that. It's time to talk about our top 5 not undisputed. There's a few undisputed fighters in the cruiserweight, but there's not 5 of them. But we are going through the top 5 undefeated fighters in the cruiserweight. As said before, you have to retire undefeated with 10 professional fights and be in the cruiserweight. So with that being said, let's break it down. So the list of boxers here are tough. We do not have any undefeated boxers that have retired undefeated as a champion in the cruiserweight. We are getting close to that with 1 boxer, but we don't know the outcome yet of how many pro fights he has. So with all that being said, it's going to be tough because the 5 boxers I found on the list are pretty tough to find. But it's better to try. So with that being said, my number 5 pick of the undefeated boxer, he comes from a country called Denmark. A man that's only had a short career in his life. The man did have some interesting amateur experience in his career back in the day from 96 to 06. He did compete against some great fighters from guys like Roger Peterson in 2000, where he had a tough Olympian fighter at the time, and had other fighters, guys like Johnny Rauhala, and even many other fighters in his career. So he had his moments to take on some interesting amateur experiences in his career. He wasn't a Danish champion and a world champion, but he never got a lot of experiences taking on some great fighters in his career. But again, those were the most experienced amateur fighters or long-time journeyman amateur fighters that have had fought a lot of fights in their career. And so even though he did start pro boxing in 2006, having a bundle of fights in his career, and he did defeat a few undefeated fighters in his debut career, such as a 13-0-1 fighter in his pro debut, barely went 6 rounds with him, took on a 6-0-1 fighter who also had a great run for 6 rounds. He took on a 4-0 fighter in November, and even though some of his other fights might have not been that good, and by 2007, he took some time off, taking on some nobodies, but again, when you're in a situation in your pro debut career, it's better to take some time off. And surprisingly, he did a good job. He took on another fighter who was a decent journeyman fighter with an okay record. fought him for the IBA vacant Intercontinental Cruiserweight and won 12 rounds. And 3 months later, he would fight one more fight to score a third round knockout, and that was it. That guy's name, who none of you people know, goes by the name of Anders Hugger. Spelled Anders, Anders, last name Hugger. Hugger. So Andres Hugger, what can I say about him? Well, I will say though, after counting out 3, 4, even though 4 out of 11 of his fights are good fights that he fought against, and as for his opponents that he defeated that had an undefeated record, well, unfortunately, they never had their careers recovered. Like, even his debut fighter he fought against retired after that last fight. His opponent, Alexander Kotwabe, who was a 6-0-1 fighter at the time, that lost against him in 2006. Well, after his defeat, he went on to become the GBU World Cruiserweight Championship. He had some promising fights as an IBF International Cruiserweight Champion until he lost against Enzo Macronelli in 2010 and another guy named Rakim Chakikiev in 2012, which would be his last pro fight. And those fighters also had opportunities because Rakim became an IBO a World Cruiserweight Champion and an EBU European Cruiserweight Champion in 2014 and 2015. But lost against other great fighters like him. But still, those were some of the fighters that Anders Hugger took care of. And he defeated them. So it wasn't a waste of time. No, but there's a lot to it. He proved himself. So anyway, our number 4 fighter on the list goes by the name. He's a Polish fighter that's fought for 6 years in boxing. And to be honest, he had a lot to prove. Now, just to let you guys know, there is one thing I will have to point this out. His knockout ratio is 71.43% in his career. Anders had a 54.55% knockout ratio. So Anders had 6 knockouts out of 11 in his career. While this Polish fighter had 21 wins, 2 draws, and 15 knockouts. Was he that good? Well, say hello to Tomasz Hatkowski, who spelled Tomaz. His last name is Hut, Hut, Kow, Ko, and Ski, which is ski, Ski. So, Hatkowski. Tomasz Hatkowski. This 39-year-old man, who is actually now 39 years old, so the odds of him making a comeback is possible, and even though he did retire at the age of 25, I will say, though, about his career in the world of pro boxing, he never had a lot of amateur experience. He had, but his career was tough. Now, even though he scored more wins than Anders, but again, his late career started from 2006 as well. Had fights in 2007, taken on a bunch of nobodies, a bunch of Sakura Hagiwaras, guys with mediocre records. Until 2008, he did score a draw in 2007, who was a 3-4-1 fighter. But his real great victory came in 2008 in October when he fought for the WBC Youth World Cruiserweight Championship, won a 10-round fight. He retained it against some other journeyman jobber fighters. But he did took on one of Alexander Usyk's first few opponents in his career, and his name was Ben Nasafoa. And surprisingly, that was a great win. He did defeat a journeyman fighter in 2009 named Ismail Abdul, but again, the fighters and the resumes were not that good. He did took on 11-1-1 fighter in September of 2010, but scored a 10-round majority draw, and that was it. He came in during the time taking on nothing there. So even though his WBC Youth World Cruiserweight is the reason why I'm putting him at number 4, he had a much longer career, better than Anders, but again, I barely did almost put him at number 4, just barely, because he had more wins, but I am starting to change my mind that Anders did better than he did. But yeah, by the end of 2010, he would only have one pro fight in 2011 and again 2012, scoring second round and first round knockout, and he would actually not box again. So unfortunately, his 6 years in boxing was tough enough. Don't get me wrong, he was the interim youth cruiserweight. He was the WBC Baltic cruiserweight as well around the time. But again, it just wasn't worth it. There wasn't a lot of great competition here for anyone else to look at the matter, but I just don't know. It just seemed tough. It was not a good work of boxing here. Again, I can't really say it was terrible. Like there's a lot of great competition to talk about, but I just can't answer it. Sorry. So our next opponent on this list comes from Cuba. And even though his resume is somewhat similar than our Polish buddy, the only thing about this guy is that his amateur career started out in a bum way. He had a couple of defeats against a fighter in his amateur twice in 6 days apart. But those would be his only 2 amateur defeats, because he would go on. He would become a world junior champion in the middleweight in 2006. He took on a tough opponent from guys like Sean Porter, Emilio Correa in 2007. And after that, he went on to become a pro fighter after those great wins in his amateur career. And even though he started out slow with one pro fight in 2008, he came out with a slow amount of fights. He took on a good fighter from a 15-5 fighter, and even some other journeyman opponents, which weren't terrible, even though his record wasn't all there. Even though his fights did took place in Ireland and the UK mostly by 2010, until he moved to America in 2011, he started fighting opponents. Unfortunately, his victory against Alexander Johnson in his debut in America in 2011 would be his only fight for a long time. He came out in America. He did defeat Byron Mitchell in 2010, which was another interesting fight for his career. But yeah, unfortunately, he would never come back until December 2015. Takes off a nobody. Again in 2016, another nobody. He takes on Felipe Romero, another fighter of Alexander Usyk's opponent, and went down and won the fight in 2017. He never fought again. You want to know what's crazy? Most of his fights were light heavyweight fights until he came back in 2015 to 2016 and 17. He fought those last 3 fights were in the cruiserweight. His other fights were in the light heavyweight. So, what's his name? Well, his name goes by the name of El Leon, Luis Garcia. And all I can say is, the only thing I can say about Luis Garcia is, even though he did fight light heavyweight, he had a better amateur experience. Yeah, it might not be a lot then. He never became a champion or a regional champion like the other guys, but the reason I put him up there is because at least he had more fights. He had a promising run. He was in the right area. He had great amateur experience. Yes, he didn't fight a lot in the cruiserweight, but I will say, though, I do find him more historical than anything else. So he was an easy pick to put in at number 3. At number 2 is a guy that comes from the country of Guyana, born in Guyana but living in Rosendale, New York. He fought for 8 years. And even though our number 3 opponent had a record of, as said before, 15 wins, a good amount of wins in his career. What was his knockout percentage? 80% of his 12 knockouts. Well, this guy had a record of 17 wins, 9 knockouts, and 52.94% of his knockouts. From 2005 to 2013, the guy was a southpaw fighter, and even though he never had a lot of amateur run in his career, he was the USA New York State light heavyweight champion. But in the middle, he was fighting in cruiserweight and light heavyweight half the time. He did have some pro fights in his early career, taking on 1-0 fighters, but then 0-4 fighters, and then he took on an 0-2 fighter. But there were some moments that he was a promising contender until he won in 2010. It seemed like he was going to get an opportunity. He took on another fighter in 2011 who was his first good opponent, who was 9-1. The thing was, he wasn't in the right area or with the right promoters at the time. So by the end of 2011, when he fought early that year and never fought again until March 2013, he took on another nobody fighter with unknown promoters. That was it. Because after that victory, it was over. Don't get me wrong. He seemed like another fighter that had a lot more of experience than anyone else did. Even though he did fight light heavyweight and cruiserweight a lot more than Luis Garcia, and even though I put Luis Garcia at number 3 because he only had some fights in the cruiserweight and I couldn't find a lot of competitors, the only reason I put this guy at number 2 is because he did become a New York champion and he was fighting mostly around the middle of light heavyweight and cruiserweight. And by the way, when you look at some of the fights that he was fighting at over 175 pounds, some of his men were under that weight. So it was tough to fight some guys that were over that weight and under that weight. That guy with a 17 record and 9 victories by knockout, his name was Ronson Frank. And Ronson Frank, I will say though, he had moments. Even though it's hard to find footage about him, and even though he did had some promising moments in his career, again, there were times that he was fighting overweight. Like one time in December 2007, he was 179 pounds, and his opponent with a 4-9 record, also a southpaw like him, same age, was 172 pounds, and they promoted that as a light heavyweight fight. So it's not like that he was in the middle of the weight class. He was always boxing in the middle of the 175 pound, or even he would box at 180 pounds. So he would gain weight, lose weight, and even sometimes he would go back to cruiserweight even after fighting heavyweight or a light heavyweight. So I couldn't say it was a waste. Even though his resume isn't that good, or neither as Luis Garcia was, I couldn't say for certain that these guys were boxing in America, and there were opportunities for that. As of right now, Ronson Frank has been a promoter of 2013 for Uprising Promotions, which that's where he did, because he was being a little bit of a matchmaker promoter around this time. He was working as for his promotion, Uprising Promotions. If you want to find where the Uprising Promotions are, if you guys want to learn how to be a boxer and meet up with Ronson Frank, like I said before, you can actually find the guy, as he is living and based in New York City as we speak, because Ronson Frank is living in Rosendale, New York. If you want to find the boxing promotion there, go out there, meet him, and wish luck. Because even though the guy might not fight anymore, in my opinion, because as a matchmaker promoter, but even though it is hard to find him, because as of right now, since July the 2nd, 2021, which was his last ever time he ever promoted a show, he's never been around since. So it is unknown to find information of where he is. But the reason I do put him at number 2 is because he was stalled out for a long time in his career. And even though Frank had to wait for his return in the ring when he was in a promotional contract with a guy named O'Shea Brothers, when the O'Shea brothers that were involved with promotions at the time in his career, and when they expired, Frank went on to a comeback fight. He opted to retire at 35 years old, and that's what he did, and became a promoter, putting up stuff in local Brooklyn, New York, in shows for contracted for any other prospects in smaller venues until 2021. So we don't know the information, but I just hope he can understand that he is being talked about as we speak and not being forgotten. All in all, he had his moments. Yeah. So our number 1 opponent of all time, and you know what? I might as well say his name. How many of you people ever heard of William Bezerra? A guy with 40 wins, 39 knockouts, with 97.5% of knockout ratio, also known as his alias Thompson, boxing from 2010 to 2016 from a beautiful place called Brazil. How many of you people ever heard of this guy? Because I'm sure none of you people know about him. Well, I'll tell you guys, William Bezerra is a knockout machine. William Bezerra's entire career at number 1, and the reason I put him at number 1 is because he's been boxing so much at his time as a legit prize fighter. Like, the most he's ever weighed in his entire boxing career was one time he weighed 200.5 pounds, which took place in 2014, and his opponent was 218 pounds. Guess what they did? That was his first ever heavyweight fight. But again, he wasn't even close from even being there. And the least he's ever weighed in his career, like I would say 197.75 at one point, and even 197.5. There he is. Well, he weighed 193.75 pounds in November of 2010. Dang, that's the lowest he's ever weighed. So yeah, that's how much he's weighed. He's always kept his weight limit in the middle of the 193 to barely 200 pounds. And he sometimes fights at 200 pounds. The reason I put William at number 1 is for 2 reasons. One, he has over 40 wins, a bunch of knockouts. He's fought Cruiserweight. And secondly, all of the above. He's won like crazy. Like his 3rd pro fight, he had a second 2-0 fighter. 4th pro fight, it was a 4-0. His next fight, 3-0, 6-0. His first 2 fights were 3-1 and 1-3, but that's not the point. He had a fight in August that year that was actually an 8-0 fighter. And then his next fight in his 9th pro fight was a 6-0-2. His next one, 6-0. And most of these fights were by quick knockout stoppages. In October of 2010, one day before celebrating 10-10-10, and also, Bound for Glory of TNA, he won the South American Cruiserweight Championship against a 7-0 fighter. Retained that title at his 193-pound weight in November against a 5-0 fighter. And then he went on to retain the South American title multiple times. He fought against guys that had maybe 1 pro defeat in their career. He became the Brazilian Cruiserweight champion in February of 2011. Retained titles back and forth, taking on some tough opponents in his career. And as for his one fight that he had not win by knockout, took place against the, you guessed it, 5-0 fighter who was Hierro Salcedo. The same fight where he weighed 193 pounds. It stated that the South American Boxing Promotion Union version of a champion at that time. and the fight went 12 rounds by decision. The thing is, I try to look up information, and on Wikipedia, on the BoxRec Wikipedia, is unknown because there's no information on why William won the fight by disqualification. We don't know what happened. We don't know why Salcedo was disqualified after 12 rounds. We don't know if the fight was a draw or a technical draw or something happened. We don't know. Or maybe it was a drug test. We don't know. All we know is the fight ended by DQ, meaning that was the only pro fight that William never won by knockout. But it didn't stop him because months later, he was, again, like I said before, Brazilian champion. He was retaining his South American titles a bunch of times. He went on, pushed himself straight in to the other side. He was retaining his South American Brazilian title so much. He was winning multiple fights in 2010, 11, and winning fights in 2012 nonstop. He was having over 10 professional fights every year. That right there is ridiculous. But by 2013, and keep this in mind, he was still taking on other fighters in 2012 that had undefeated records. By the end of 2011, he had a 3-0 fight. In January the next year was 8-0. February 10-0, 11-0 in March. And then the other fights were 14-3, 7-4, 17-2. It makes you wonder who these fighters were and how good was their resume. But I'm not going to get into that because it's going to be too much. His next fight in July was 8-0. Next fight in December of 2012, his last fight was a 16-1 fighter. And I'm sure some of these fighters were legit, but I'm not going to get into them as much because it's going to be too much talking. But again, in 2013, he took months off because by the end of 2012, he had accomplished a record of 33 pro wins. Keep that in mind. From May the 8th, 2016 to December the 12th, 2012, he had 33 pro fights. That right there is ridiculous. You can't come up with a match like that before. So his last 7 pro fights took him some time because by 2013, he only had 3 pro fights, which were against a tough opponent. And some of these fights were like 11 rounds or something like that. There were 11-round fights once in a while. Ridiculous. But yeah, he had moments. Like he took on a 17-0 fighter that year, won, had a rematch against his fighter in December, won. And then after the end of the year, he took on a journeyman fighter, which he deserved. Again, it goes to show you what his competition was. And by the way, he had a trilogy fight against that fighter again the next year in 2014 and won by first round knockout. So it makes you wonder because now looking at some of his resume, some of the fighters he fought against, some of them were rematch fights, but most of them were just new fighters for him. Anyway, by the end of 2014, after having a couple fights a month apart from each other from July and August, all by first round knockout, he would take time off in his career until 2015. He took on a 7-0 fighter to retain his South American Cruiserweight title one last time until March the 19th, 2016, his last pro fight, which was also for the Brazilian Cruiserweight champion as well, which was the CBBP version, which whatever that means. His opponent, 14-2, would suffer another first-round defeat against the hands of William. After all of that, William has a multiple first-round knockouts in his career. He's a killer. Let me count. He has 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Wow. 40 pro fights. 20 of those knockouts came in the first round. So it goes to show you that this guy was a killer. Pretty much. He was that good. So, yeah, even though he was a legit opponent being trained and competed by great people, for reasons why he never got the opportunity, we'll never know. As of right now, William decided to just quit boxing. He is 41 years old. He did retire at 31 years old that year. So even though it's been 10 years since his last pro fight, all I can say is he is one of the greatest cruiserweight fighters to retire undefeated, which is not bad. Unfortunately, that might not be for long because he might be surpassed by one boxer that is stating a retirement this year if he takes on Deontay Wilder. And if that happens, William Barrera, he might be dropped down to number 2. So we're going to have to wait to see what happens and wait for that time to come. Yeah. So with that being said, thank you for watching this episode. And next time, we are going to review all 5 episodes of the Road to the Undisputed Atomweight Championship of the World. And while I'm doing that, considering we are around the time because the WBA heavyweight champion is going to take place on the 11th of Saturday in a few days. So after that, I will review another fight. And even though this is my 5th episode this month, so I'm doing 5 more episodes by the next week. So that's like 10 straight episodes. So I might take some time off to review 5 more episodes this month of July. And then maybe in August, we might take some time off. So, yeah, after doing 37 episodes, if I ever do 15 episodes, dang, I wasn't thinking of doing that much episode. I promised to do 10 episodes this month, but man, I might do 15. Man, 37 plus 15, that's 52. Maybe 10 more episodes in August won't hurt. I might take a hiatus in August just for the heck of it. Just because school vacation will come. And there might be times I might pick up bottles and cans when I go to watch football games or something. So we'll see about that next time. So with that being said, thank you for watching this episode. And with that being said, see you next time. We're out.